The United News Marathon continues on the 1+1 TV channel and the television news service. The enemy used tanks, drones, missiles, and artillery to attack Ukraine, including the village of Blahodativka. In the Kharkiv region, the occupiers carried out an airstrike. A 22-year-old man was killed. 5 more people were injured. He did not survive. There was also shelling in the village of Osinove, and in the Borivska community, 2 people were injured in a car hit by a drone. Since morning, the Russians have been shelling Kherson with artillery. There was a massive strike on the historic buildings in the city center. Later, they shelled 3 more districts, destroying homes and infrastructure. Rescuers freed a woman from a partially destroyed house. A 15-year-old teenager was also injured as a result of these attacks. He suffered a concussion and blast injuries. 4 more women from the city sustained shrapnel wounds. A 21-year-old man. Yes, there were injuries in Chernihiv region. In the residential area of Novgorod-Siversky, the Russians struck with a grenade. About 10 houses, cars, outbuildings, and a state emergency service building were damaged. In Hlukivsami region, the Russians destroyed a school, administrative buildings, and residential homes. In Shostka, 2 enterprises were hit, and in the Druzhbivska community, the occupiers targeted a service vehicle, Ukrposhta, and a civilian infrastructure facility. An attack with glide bombs on Zaporizhzhia took place during the day amid an air raid. Loud explosions rang out in the city. One of the bombs fell on a residential area. 7 people were injured, including a child. They suffered blast injuries and acute stress reactions. Several families have been left homeless. Our correspondent Daria Nazarova knows more about the consequences.
The street is full of people. After the shelling, residents are gathering what remains among the ruins of their belongings. Maria and Anatoly, a married couple, can't recover from the shock. The explosion turned their house into rubble. They say it all happened in an instant.
Just like that. Bang! And it was all over.
Now, instead of a yard near this house, there's a huge crater. Next to it stands a shattered 2-story building. The owner of this house, Vyacheslav, can't speak calmly after what he's been through.
My ears are ringing. I still can't recover.
Miss Lilia is frightened and in shock. She can barely hold back her tears. At the moment of the strike, her 13-year-old son was at home.
The child was at home, 8th grade, getting ready for lessons, different subjects. And this year we took the younger one to school and went to pick him up. She called and said, something hit here and the neighbors are burning something. Well, it was a direct hit. On the 2nd floor, it hit the radiator, but he was sitting nearby by the window right next to it. Luckily, I don't know, he just kept looking for a long time.
Mr. Alexander was watching monitoring channels. As soon as he heard the explosion, he says he rushed to his 3-year-old child. I
grabbed the child and took him. There's a big wall there. When it hit, I fell on top of the child. There's destruction all around.
When he went out into the yard, he was horrified by what he saw.
The car is gone. There's no way to drive it anywhere now. I don't even know what hit here.
Remnants of houses are scattered along the street. At least 2 homes have been completely destroyed, and dozens more have been damaged. In another district, the premises of a local business were damaged. The occupiers' terror did not end there. The Russians struck another district of Zaporizhzhia. A person was wounded there. Emergency and utility services are currently working at the sites of the attacks. All the consequences of the shelling are being determined. Daria Nazarova, Andrey Kupovka, Zaporizhzhia, TSN 1+ Marathon, United News.
Trucks are not being allowed through due to a fire on the Odesa-Reni highway. Traffic for light vehicles is also restricted there. 2 border checkpoints with Moldova near the village of Palanka have suspended operations for drivers and travelers. It is recommended to use other border crossing points, in particular to travel through Mohyliv-Podilsky. The enemy is trying to destroy bridges and cut off access to the center. The southern part of the region, the day before, both during the day and at night, the Russians deliberately attacked the crossing with drones and ballistic missiles. During the strike, a 43-year-old female driver and 3 children were killed. The medics hospitalized them. At the same time, the Russians continued to destroy the energy infrastructure of the region. The nighttime strike once again left a large residential district of Odesa without electricity. And our TSN correspondent is ready to tell you more about this. Olena Korneyeva, she is with us live. Olena, so how many people are once again without electricity right now? What is the situation with heating and water? Hello, Marichka. Just recently, energy workers managed to restore power to most consumers after yet another Russian attack. Once again, 65,000 residents of Odesa have been left without electricity as well as without water and heat. And another 9,000 families have been without electricity since the massive attack. That was on December 13th, so it's already been a week. These are the residents of Artsys. The day before, energy workers showed a video of the substation that supplied them. There's practically nothing left of it. As for Odesa, here no electricity. A large residential district. Energy workers are once again repairing the equipment. The damage is significant, so it will take time. First of all, they will restore power to critical infrastructure to provide heat and water. People have once again lined up at water wells for drinking water. Technical water is being delivered by tankers.
We always keep 8 bottles of water on the balcony for the bathroom. It's just my husband and me, so there aren't many of us. And 2 to 3 bottles as well. We constantly rotate them. For cooking, and this time we somehow missed it, so let's keep a reserve, because we don't know when it'll be turned back on. That's the problem. That night it was very loud, really scary.
We take some to eat, to make tea, just to have something to drink. And as for bathing, well, that's up to God. How could you possibly carry that much? It's hard without electricity, without water. Before, they used to turn it off sometimes, but now, as you know yourself, it's much worse. But we hope for the best. God willing, everything will be all right.
Trams and trolley buses are not running on their routes. Electricity is being conserved to supply homes. And once again, some suburban trains have been cancelled. Schools in the affected area were also operating remotely today.
Because there's no electricity, they told the children to stay home. But we don't have electricity at home either. We can't join classes online.
In other districts of the city, there is a bit more electricity, but the supply is still just as unpredictable and impossible to forecast. There are no schedules. The city authorities of Odesa have decided to provide benefits to entrepreneurs who open resilience points in their premises. They are promised up to 10,000 hryvnias for partial compensation and the purchase of generators, and the same amount to compensate for fuel expenses for them. Those who rent municipal property are exempted from rent payments until the end of martial law. Other regions of Ukraine are currently helping Odesa residents. Rescuers from 12 regions are working here. They have set up more than 660 points of invincibility, prepare food in mobile kitchens of the State Emergency Service, and deliver drinking and technical water. But the enemy terror does not stop. Air raid sirens sound almost non-stop, and attack drones come in swarms.
Thank you, Olena. I can see that you really don't have much light there, and in fact, only the device shining from the camera is illuminating the view of Odesa and the cars moving behind you. Strength to all Odesa residents. These are difficult times after the Russian strikes against our infrastructure, and our colleague from Odesa, Olena Chernyayeva, reported on this. The defense forces carried out a special operation to destroy a concentration of enemy armored vehicles near Pokrovsk. Aerial reconnaissance units detected the Russians preparing for a mechanized assault on Ukrainian positions in the Pokrovsk direction and acted preemptively with strike drones. As a result of the air attack, 7 tanks, 7 armored vehicles, and an Odesa anti-aircraft missile system were destroyed. In addition to attempts to capture Pokrovsk, the Russians are assaulting Mirnorad. The Marines have shown the current logistics route to the city. Enemy drones and destroyed equipment sometimes leave only a narrow gap for passage. Therefore, the highest possible speed is the only condition for survival. And even a forced stop does not prevent Ukrainian soldiers from moving forward. Despite Ukrainian resistance and Russian losses, the occupiers are making gains in Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia. According to the analytical project Deep State, the Russians have achieved success near Dronivka. Nikonorivka and Pankivka are in Donetsk region, as well as near Huliaipol in Zaporizhzhia. There's nowhere to hide. For the first time, the security service of Ukraine struck a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker in neutral waters. In the Mediterranean Sea, Ukrainian drones attacked from the air. The tanker Kandil. This happened almost 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. At the time of the special operation, the ship was not carrying any cargo and was empty. So this attack did not cause any environmental damage. But the enemy, who used it to circumvent sanctions, suffered significant losses. But as TSN has learned from its own sources, this is not the only surprise for the occupiers. As a result of the attack on the ship, a high-ranking military officer, whose unit specializes in sabotage operations, assassination attempts, and destabilization abroad, may have been eliminated. He was on the international wanted list and may have been involved in the explosions at depots in Bulgaria and the Czech Republic, as well as implicated in the annexation of Crimea and poisonings of the Skripal family with Novichok in Salisbury. In addition, the SBU has already struck a third Russian oil extraction platform in the Caspian Sea. This time, drones attacked a drilling rig at the Rakushechnoi field. The footage shows a successful strike on the gas turbine unit. During a one-on-one meeting, King Naworodsky presented Volodymyr Zelenskyy with a book about Volyn. This is a 2-volume edition, Documents of the Volyn Crime, which was published in 2023 when Naworodsky was head of the Institute of National Remembrance. Our correspondent from Slava TV, Natalka Bolosatska, who is currently in Warsaw, will tell us about the long-awaited meeting between the presidents of Ukraine and Poland. Natalka, so the gift is a special moment of this meeting with an important subtext, but overall, this first meeting is a bit of a break from protocol, since usually when a president is newly elected, he should be the one to visit the president who has been in office for a long time. What preceded it, and how did it actually take place?
Hello, Marichka. The conversation was long and candid, said Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the press conference. But in fact, there was a bit of a fly in the ointment. The president of Poland stated that there is a feeling in Polish society that the support and assistance that Poland has provided to Ukraine has not been properly appreciated. He also added that the Ukrainian authorities have the means to overcome this trend of Poles feeling undervalued. But the Polish president began his speech by stating that official Warsaw supports sanctions against Russia, strikes on its shadow fleet, and the transfer of frozen Russian assets. Commenting perhaps on the transfer of MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine, the president of Poland, he noted that making such a decision goes beyond his direct authority. At the same time, he made it clear that the transfer of these aircraft is possible as part of an exchange for Ukrainian anti-drone technologies. The president also said that Donald Trump is the only leader who can force Putin to make peace. He also mentioned, of course, historical issues, in particular the fact that the Polish side has sent 26 requests to Ukraine for exhumations. He emphasized that these issues need to be resolved. Let's hear the direct quote.
Today's visit by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to Warsaw is undoubtedly good news for Poland, for Warsaw, good news for Kyiv, good news for our entire region, and bad news for Moscow and the Russian Federation. This visit is proof that Poland, Ukraine, and the countries of the region share a common position on strategic cooperation in the field of security.
Volodymyr Zelenskyy commented on yesterday's decision by the European Union to allocate 90 billion, saying that this is a historic decision that gives Ukraine confidence for the coming years. If Russia drags out the war, this money will go towards defense. If the war ends, it will be used for reconstruction. In his opinion, this is a signal to Russia that there is no point in continuing the war, since Europe steadfastly supports Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelenskyy also said that Ukraine is offering Poland all of its military experience so that together we can strengthen our countries and Europe militarily. In particular, this concerns drone technologies, since Ukraine is the only country in the world that knows how to shoot down all types of Russian drones that Russia could use against its neighbors. Let's listen to the president of Ukraine.
Ukraine is now not only receiving support from our friends and neighbors, but is also offering its own experience of defense in this war. Today, Ukraine possesses the most advanced technologies for protecting people's lives and the greatest and strongest capabilities for weapons production. Weapons that are modern and effective, and I am offering all this experience to Poland. We discussed this today with the president.
Zelenskyy also noted that Ukraine is ready for further cooperation in resolving historical issues. According to Zelenskyy, every victim deserves proper Christian commemoration. At the same time, he emphasized that Ukraine respects Polish national memory and expects the same attitude toward Ukrainian memory. Volodymyr Zelenskyy also commented on the issue of Oreshnik's relocation. The president said that he knows where it was placed on the territory of Belarus and that this information was passed on to partners. From there, it is up to them to assess the level of threat and decide how to respond further. Zelenskyy emphasized that not a single drone is being shot down, nutcracker. He also emphasized that the Ukrainian side has appealed to the European Union to impose sanctions on companies that sell components to Oreshnik to Russia through third parties. No such sanctions have been imposed, so the Russian Federation continues to produce these ballistic missiles. Finally, I'll say that I managed to, in the corridors, hear how the Ukrainian delegation reflected on Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to Warsaw, and in fact, off the record. They assessed this visit as very good, one that somewhat lowered the tension in Polish-Ukrainian relations. Mariszka.
Natalka, thank you. Our colleague from Slava TV, Natalka Volosacka, about Volodymyr Zelensky's first meeting with the newly elected president of Poland. They say the level of tension between the countries is now supposed to decrease. The decision on Russian reparations failed, but instead they praised the EU's funding for Ukraine of 90 billion euros from the budget. This was the outcome of yesterday's meetings of European leaders. Until the very end, they tried to persuade Belgium to agree to hand over the aggressors' funds to Kyiv, but in the end, they had to resort to Plan B. It is known that the funds will be allocated as a loan for the next 2 years. This will allow Ukraine to avoid a budget deficit as early as next spring. About the battle surrounding Russian money and what prevented the decision to transfer it to Ukraine, TSN correspondent Oksana Tkachenko will tell us more.
Even as European leaders were just arriving in Brussels, the European Commission issued a warning. This would be one of the most difficult summits in recent years. After all, the European Union hasn't seen this many disputes, probably not since 2023, when Ukraine was granted candidate status for EU membership. On the agenda are Russian funds, which were supposed to be allocated to Ukraine in the form of a reparations loan. The debates lasted almost until 3 in the morning, but Brussels still hasn't dared to hand over the aggressors' funds. They had to resort to Plan B. They decided to cover Ukraine's financial needs by means of a loan from the European budget, 90 billion euros, allocated for the next 2 years. European Council President Antonio Costa expresses optimism about the decision made on the social network X. We promised, we delivered. Joining her colleague is the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Just yesterday, the official promised that they would not leave the decision-making room without securing funds for Ukraine.
We gathered with a clear purpose, to address Ukraine's urgent financial needs for the next 2 years. And I am very pleased to say that we have succeeded. We have secured this agreement. It is very important that Ukraine will only have to repay this loan after receiving reparations from Russia.
The main opponent of allocating a reparations loan to Ukraine using frozen Russian assets, Belgian Prime Minister Bart De Wever. It is in their depository, Euroclear, that the largest Kremlin treasury is held, 185 billion euros. One after another, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and even British Prime Minister Keir Starmer tried to persuade De Wever to hand over this money. Yesterday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy also tried to personally present his arguments to the Belgian politician. Evidently, the persuasion did not work. In Brussels, they are too afraid of financial lawsuits from Russia, and they wanted the other countries to share all the risks with them. While speaking with journalists, Bart De Wever calls yesterday's decisions a victory and reminds critics that Russian money still remains frozen with them, indefinitely. He promises that sooner or later it will be used to compensate Ukraine.
Everyone can leave this meeting room as a winner. I believe that Ukraine has won. It has received urgent, predictable and reliable funding that it needs for the next 2 years based on EU borrowing on the capital markets backed by the EU's budget reserve. This is not a fragile construct. It is stable, legally sound and financially reliable. A European solution. We have avoided chaos. We have avoided division.
Western journalists do not share the politicians' optimism. The summit showed that Europe still does not want to pay for Ukraine's rescue. That was the headline in Politico. Bart De Wever kept his golden goose, and the three kings are Babiš, Orban and Fico. Merry Christmas, Ukraine! That's what Radio Liberty commentator Richard Jozwiak wrote. The three kings, whom the journalist wrote about so ironically, managed the day before to secure permission not to contribute to the common fund for Ukraine. And it was precisely this that made it possible to reach a decision. Unanimously. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban does not hide it. Budapest opposed all options for financing Kyiv. He even criticized the allocation of funds from the EU budget.
I think this is an extremely bad decision that brings Europe closer to war. And it looks like a loan. But of course, Ukrainians will never be able to pay it back.
So, essentially, this is lost money. And those who are behind this loan will bear responsibility and financial consequences for it. 3 countries have decided not to take part in this. This is an option for the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. So we are not to blame.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy also commented on yesterday's decisions of the EU Council. I thank all the leaders of the European Union for the decision of the European Council regarding financial support for Ukraine in the amount of 90 billion euros for 2026 to 2027. This is significant support that truly strengthens our resilience. It is important that Russian assets remain frozen and that Ukraine has received a financial security guarantee for the coming years. Thank you for the result and for the unity. Economic analysts emphasize that, despite the lack of political will for a 90 billion euro reparations loan from the European Union budget, this is a lifeline for Ukraine, which could have faced a massive financial crisis as early as April. Currently, Kyiv spends about a third of its budget on defense, so Brussels covers the rest of the social needs, such as pensions or salaries for teachers and doctors. Overall, according to IMF estimates, Ukraine needs 135 billion euros to stay afloat over the next 2 years. Oksana Tkachenko, Valentin Shilko, TSN 1+1 Marathon United News.
A new round of negotiations between Ukraine and the United States will take place today in Miami. After that, over the weekend, the Russians will fly to the US for their own consultations. Donald Trump the day before urged Ukraine not to delay its decision, saying that otherwise Russia might change its mind. Our TSN correspondent in the United States, Olha Koshelenko. More details to follow.
Meetings in Miami between the Ukrainian and American sides took place yesterday and will continue today. Representing Ukraine at the negotiating table are the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov, and the Chief of the General Staff, Andriy Hnatov. On the American side, the President's Special Representative Steve Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are present. Both sides are keeping the course of the negotiations secret. However, according to President Zelenskyy of Ukraine, one of the most problematic issues remains the status of the non-occupied part of Donetsk region, from which the armed forces of Ukraine, despite the wishes of the Russians and pressure from the United States, are not planning to withdraw without a fight. Donald Trump once again called on Ukraine to speed up its decision-making.
They are getting close to something. But I hope that Ukraine will move faster because Russia is ready. And you know, every time it takes them too long, after that Russia changes its position.
After the talks with Ukraine, Witkoff and Kushner are also scheduled to have a conversation with the Russians there in Miami. According to sources, Putin's envoy Kirill Dmitriev will traditionally fly in for the meeting. No other potential participants have been named. And while the United States is putting pressure on Ukraine, American senators are making demands of their own president. First, to seize $5 billion of frozen Russian assets in the United States and transfer them for the benefit of Ukraine. Second, to increase pressure on the shadow fleet that is smuggling Russian oil. Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Olha Stefanishina, confirmed that at a meeting with European ambassadors, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced that new anti-Russian sanctions may be announced next week. Reporting from the United States, Olha Koshelenko, Maxim Shenkarenko, TSN 1+ Marathon. United News.
Our Christmas Through the Prism of 6 Centuries, a large-scale exhibition has opened at the Andrey Sheptytsky National Museum in Lviv. There they have gathered over 400 works of art and Christmas artifacts ranging from the oldest monuments of the 15th century to contemporary works by Ukrainian artists. The exhibits were brought in from various regions of Ukraine. TSN correspondent Marichka Kuzik has already seen them. She is with us live now. Greetings, colleague. What impressed you at the exhibition? Is this really the largest Christmas project in Ukraine?
Greetings, Rika. I'm near the Andrey Sheptytsky National Museum, and today it's extremely crowded here. Hundreds of visitors have come to see history, Christmas through the prism of art and traditional Christmas attributes. The exhibition spans 6 centuries from the 15th to the 21st century, and it really is the largest Christmas art project in Ukraine, according to the museum.
The extensive exhibition beautifully showcases the rich history of Christmas from the earliest recorded times, commencing with significant Christmas icons vividly depicting the sacred nativity scene originating from the venerable 15th century. It then transitions into folk icons, icons from various periods, folk art, Ukrainian traditions, as well as Christmas as reflected in the works of Ukrainian artists. From the 19th, early 20th century, the 20th century, and the 21st century.
Particularly valuable are the exhibits that are rarely seen in open access. Among them are colorful miniatures in the Kiev Psalter of 1397 dedicated to the theme of Christmas.
The section of ancient art from the 15th, 16th, 17th and 18th centuries is especially fascinating. This is where we begin to talk about Ukrainian Christmas. There are works of icon painting, ancient handwritten books and early printed books, as well as old engravings on display there.
In total, the exhibition brings together about 400 works ranging from ancient icons to contemporary installations and video art. There is a separate section dedicated to traditional Christmas attributes. Here you can see the diduk. This is a symbol of abundance and family, a Christmas star for nativity scenes, as well as a recreated interior of a Ukrainian home with festive decorations, including candlesticks, pavuki, traditional straw ornaments, fitinanki, paper cuttings, and kreshchiki, ice cross-shaped ornaments. Visitors admit that the scale of the exhibition is truly impressive, and each piece tells the story of Christmas in its own way and evokes completely different emotions.
My deepest expectations were completely fulfilled. I truly wanted to see something much more joyful and uplifting than what our current life truly is. Indeed, Christmas is a holiday, a family celebration, and it is so spiritual and enlightening, pointing the way for a person. The path is always through the night.
I was captivated by the large Christmas star by Volodymyr Semkiv. This scorchness of the star, we remember the holiday Christmas, the birth of Christ, but the scorchness also speaks to the fact that now, where there is war.
The exhibition will run until February 15th. Marichka.
Thank you, Marichka. Marichka Kuzik from Lviv, where today one of the largest Christmas exhibitions in Ukraine has opened.